Kia ora e te whānau a i uhu karaiti ko Andrew Doubleday aho. This is a message for Sunday the 4th of February 2024 and it's based on the Gospel text of Mark chapter 1 verses 29 through to 39. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now, Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening, at sunset, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons, and he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is searching for you." He answered, "Let's go on to the neighbouring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also, for that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues and casting out demons. In May of 1998, Lynn and I and our youngest son found ourselves in Jerusalem. We hadn't intended to be there for the 50th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel, but we were. That's another story. And on the Sabbath, the Shabbat, we went into town, into the centre, to look for some tea, get something to eat. The place was totally closed down, quiet as not a soul about, nobody, except, I think from memory, McDonald's. And when you travel, you realise that McDonald's actually is not an unsafe option. So we went in there and we had tea. When we came out, it was like we had stepped onto a completely different planet. The place was now heaving with people. It was dark, the sun had gone down. There were families everywhere, children, there was music, there was all sorts of stuff going on. And you'd think they'd be thinking about putting their kids to bed, but no. And what we realised, of course, it took a while to catch on, but that the Sabbath had finished. It was over. And it was like they're all sitting there waiting on the edge of their seats to the clock to strike 6 or for the sun to go down or whatever the sign was, and they were gone. They were out of there and they were into town. And they were. They were a very social occasion. In our text today, we have just followed on. Jesus has just left the synagogue. This is the Sabbath. He's had his first, according in Mark's Gospel anyway, his first ministry encounter. He has delivered a man with an unclean spirit and brought him freedom. And he's now moved on and come to the home of Simon and Andrew, and Simon's mother-in-law is unwell. And so this kind of provides the context. He heals her, she ministers to them. And as the sun goes down, the same thing happens at Capernaum that happened to us in Jerusalem. It says the whole city. Well, I think probably city is may not be what we think of as a city. It's probably not a very large town, but everybody is at the door. The sun's gone down. The Sabbath is finished. They're coming out. The word has spread like wildfire. And they're there to receive healing and hope. New beginnings, fresh start, an ability to be able to face the days ahead with a measure of renewed courage and a sense that they're not alone. And so there's a massive healing event that I suspect goes late into the night as Jesus ministers with people one by one as they get what it is that they need and then head off home. One would think that at the end of it all, Jesus would be thinking, well, this is great here. I'm just going to settle in for a while and get the hang of this and see how it goes. And just to allow life to come to him. But that's in fact not what he does. Apparently we discover, and it's not the only place it tells us this, that Jesus was a very early riser. I get it. You get up really early. I mean, my alarm goes off most days about 5:15. There's nobody around. Nobody, not a soul. And it allows him to be clear and to be focused. He goes away to a quiet place and he simply opens his heart to the Father and seeks grace and seeks guidance for what's ahead. And that's what he's doing. He wants to know, what is next on the agenda? What happens now? What do I do now? We've got to this point. What's next? It's important when we're faced with new things and with change in life to seek the face of God. And you might ask, well, how does it work? Well, for me, it first starts with a thing of wanting God's best. I want to be the person that God wants me to be. I want to open my heart to the possibilities of all that God might have for me and through me. And it's in the spirit of seeking God's best that we start by simply asking, what is it? What is it? And listening to what comes. Now, I can't promise you that this is always going to work, but I know for me, generally, I can say with a measure of confidence, when I've come into that place and asked, pretty well invariably, it's the first thing that comes to mind. It usually comes pretty quickly. And then there's a process of seeking to discern that we've heard all right. Does it fit in with a kind of sense of previous leading and where God has brought us, where God has taken us? And there's a thing that I actually have always thought is really important. In Colossians 3:15 it says, let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts. It literally means let the peace of Christ be the umpire. And for me, it's as simple as putting something on, putting on a proposition, putting on a direction, putting on a way of being, like I'm putting on a coat. And seeing how that feels, seeing what does this do for me? Where do I find myself going with this? Does this fill me with a quiet sense of peace? Or is there a sense that this thing doesn't fit right? It's not what it's supposed to be. It's not for me. And I think this is a sense what Paul is saying here. Let peace be the umpire. Let it be the thing and the ultimately that guides you. Even when it's hard. I found myself in situations where there's things I have not wanted to do because they've seemed too difficult, they've seemed too hard, they've seemed too challenging, they've seemed too painful. And yet when I brought them in prayer and brought them and seeking what the answer is, there's always invariably this deep sense of peace. Andrew, it's going to be okay. This is the path you need to take. So even when it's hard, if there's no peace, think, I don't think so. I don't think so. Just let's lay this aside for a while. Decades ago, I listened to an interview. It's one that stuck with me down through the numerous decades since I first heard her. It was with a gentleman who was an Australian entrepreneur. He was highly successful man. He was a multi-millionaire. I think his name was Peter Daniels. Now, I hope I don't get any of the details wrong, but I think I've got them fairly right from those decades ago. And he was he grew up in being shifted around from foster home to foster home. Many different sets of parents. At 16 years old, he was virtually illiterate, couldn't read or write, and was a bricklayer, was laying bricks. And he went along, got dragged along by mates to a Billy Graham crusade, which profoundly changed his life. He had an encounter with Jesus. But one of the things that went with that was this assertion is that we're all of equal value. We're all equal in the eyes of God. And this was a revelation to him. And he looked around at all these people around him and thought, so I'm as good as them. I'm as valuable as they are. They're not all that much better than me. And that started him off on a completely different trajectory. So he started to go to night school. He learnt to read and to write. He had to get really basic. He went through the stages that he'd missed, getting the Australian equivalents, I guess, of school certificate and university entrance as it was for us in this country then. And went on to do a law degree, even I think while he was still laying bricks. And he got a law degree. And then he tried business. He tried 3 times and he failed 3 times. And then he struck onto something that actually worked with him and worked for him. And he became very successful. And one of the things he did is he became a motivational speaker because he'd learned so much along the way. And he wanted to share with other people how they could also step up and find some measure of success in life. And he had a television program which ran for quite a long time where he would interview famous people who were very successful in their field. And he'd said at the end of every episode, he asked them all the same question. If you had your time again, what would you do differently? And he said that invariably they all came up with the same answer. They put it in different words, but in essence, the answer was still the same. And it went something like this. If we had a chance to do it all over again, we would have dreamed bigger dreams. We would have dreamed bigger dreams. Wow. We don't dream big enough dreams. None of us do. I don't think we do. I know I don't. As Christians, we often tend to think small. Last week, I spoke about the place of fear, and I acknowledged its effect in my own life. And it comes through the fear of failure, the fear of humiliation, the fear of the exposure of my not enoughness. And I think underneath, for a lot of it, is a fear of what the personal cost for me might be. And it may be true for you as well. See, even in failure, there's always something to learn. No failure is a complete waste. No failure is an absolute 100% total loss. There's always something to learn. I look back at my life and some of the deepest humiliating failures and realise that they became the levers for strength and success in terms of what I was called to that followed. They're just bumps along the way. They can be resources for grace and strength for what's ahead. As we seek to chart the head, to chart the way ahead, as we move deeper into 2024, I want to suggest it starts with prayer, with a heart that is open to seeking God's best for God's world, for our part in it, for our place in it. What is God calling you to in 2024? And if nothing new comes, I want to suggest that perhaps the wisest course is to stick to the last thing that God called you to. It may be that something needs to be completed before you can move on to something new. Hope you found it a little bit helpful. Amen. God bless you.